You can see we're in an entirely different space, as Joe has said. But welcome to our Step Out in Faith 2021. And we are very, very, very excited about this month's opportunity for us to go into a spiritually deepening process together as a community. Our topic is spiritual awakening, raising consciousness. And so before you start, I would love it, Richard, if you would could you just pan what we've got going here? Would you be willing to this entire setup here is in Pankey Hall. We're in Pankey Hall. Ryan and our Sacred Space team have put this together, and you can see our whole entire live streaming process and live music has been moved into Pankey Hall. It's really quite something, because we're in this middle of this remediation process and restoration. And we could have gone, oh my God, what do we do now? Or we can use our spiritual tools, right? And trust that there is a way forward. That's what spiritual awakening, raising consciousness, is all about. It's not about the idea that once we decide to move on a spiritual path, that everything will be perfect, that it'll be a long, steady uphill climb into nirvana and life will be beautiful and glorious and wonderful and we'll never have another problem. That would be magical thinking. We will have less manufactured problems. We'll have less problems that we make ourselves based on faulty thinking or reactionary behaviors, but stuff still does happen. And every time we have the opportunity to decide, are we going to move forward from our spiritual truth, or are we going to fall back into old ways of thinking and being? This month, we step out in faith together, in the faith that we can meet any challenge, that we are capable of rising above every obstacle, that we can, in fact, co-create life, and that we are here designed to experience and express a joy-filled life. But it doesn't come by magical thinking, and it doesn't come by Pollyannish wishfulness, and it doesn't come by just, let's only do the things that feel good. It comes because we practice spiritual awakening and raising consciousness. Because we do the work internally within our own selves to decide that we are going to live the best life we can, be the best that we can be, and know that we are contributing to a life that is, in fact, joy-filled and beautiful. So let's start with spiritual awakening. Awakening. I love this word awakening, right? It means to wake up to something. To awaken is to wake up to something. Now, every one of us do this every morning, right? We wake up, and usually the alarm rings, and we either wake up really quickly, like, I gotta get up, or we hit the snooze, and we wake up over and over and over again until we finally say, okay, I gotta get up. I better get up now. All right, I'm up. So that is not the kind of waking up that we're talking about. Awakening is the idea that we begin to slowly and gradually become aware of things. We begin to wake up to facts, ideas, possibilities. Over time, things are made aware to us, and we become aware of them. So, for instance, we might, as a child or as a or as an adolescent, a teenager, we have a slow and gradual awakening of being a man or a woman or an intersexed person. We wake up to our own sexuality. We wake up to our gender over time as we physically mature. We awaken to our passions. We awaken to our interests. Not every little girl loves horses. Not every little boy loves sports, right? We awaken over time to our passion, to our interests, to those things that call to us. We awaken to love that has grown Perhaps love between friends. Perhaps that friendship that then grows into something beyond that. We awaken. Do you see there's this process of becoming aware of things? And once we've awakened to something, we can't go back to sleep. We can never not know it again. Unlike waking up in the morning when at nighttime, hopefully we do in fact go to sleep, kind of go unconscious there for a while, our bodies really need it. We wake up the next morning, right? We can never not know. We can have a awakening to the desire for a more meaningful life. An awakening to the way that we've lived life in the past maybe doesn't serve, or it doesn't move us in the direction that we want to go, or it just doesn't fulfill us in the way that we had hoped. Do you see? These are all the kinds of things that we can awaken to. We also awaken collectively. As a group, a family can awaken to addiction within it. A culture, a country, a community, a corporation can all awaken to racial inequality. We can awaken to the ways in which our choices are damaging our planet. We can awaken to the ways in which women's choices are being taken away from them. We can awaken to the equality of men and women and whether or not they're getting paid the same, right? These are all things that over time we begin to awaken to the way things have been, and we awaken to a call to something different. Do you see? This is what we mean by awakening. Sometimes we are drawn by something, and sometimes our awakening draws it to us. In either case, there is a process of awakening. Now, those are all kinds of awakenings. There's all kinds of different things that we awaken to. But our step out in faith is about spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening. That gradual awareness that there's something going on, way beyond just the way in which I learned life to be, way beyond a materialistic, reductionist science, way beyond just a psychological understanding about life, that there's something going on, that there is in fact a deep mystical truth that has been experienced and expressed in every spiritual tradition around the globe for tens of thousands of years. We're interested in a spiritual awakening, an awakening to the mystical, transcendent reality, to the causal spiritual reality of life, to the way it works. And, as was so beautifully said in our invocation by Oscar, and Tracy talked about it last week, this idea that we can use it because we are it. So a spiritual awakening is fundamentally an awakening to the nature of reality, its beauty and wholeness. The idea that there is an impulsion of love that is seeking to express itself through all of creation, that without creation, that love, well, it simply isn't expressed. So it's incomplete. Without creation, love is incomplete. Without you and me and the mountains and the galaxies and the ants and the birds and everything else, love is actually incomplete because it is unexpressed. There is an impulsion of life that is constantly moving toward more life. And when we awaken to that, it changes everything. And the recognition that there are universal laws and principles that we can understand and use, that this movement of love into life is not some capricious, well, maybe today and maybe not today, and maybe for you and maybe not for you, and craziness like that. That it's actually lawful. It's actually a universal principle that we can use and we can trust and we can count on to awaken to this reality and to our engagement with this reality, right? It's the same kind of step-by-step gradual awakening that happens where we begin to recognize that there is in fact something more going on. I love that we do our Step Out in Faith in spring. Spring is the perfect metaphor for this awakening, right? As the buds start to really get full, and it takes time, and you wonder and when, and then all of a sudden they burst, but they don't necessarily burst fully open, do they? The tender spring leaves are tiny. They're tiny, and then they get greener and greener and brighter, and then you go, oh, that's what spring green really looks like, right? It's that neon green, and then all of a sudden they've grown into the full leaves, and the flowers do the same. They bud, and then they get so full and thick that they burst open, and the flower is revealed, right? Spring is a beautiful metaphor for this kind of awakening, this beauty and wholeness that is life itself, pouring itself into creation, right? That is what spiritual awakening means, is to really begin to gradually become more and more and more aware of this truth and to experience it as the actual nature of reality. Now, we have a beautiful quote that's our theme quote for our Step Out in Faith this year. And the quote is, "Ships are safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are made for." Ships are safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are made for. Ships are made to sail out on the ponds and lakes and oceans of the world. Ships are made to leave the safety of the harbor, to weather the storms and to experience the beauty of the perfect summer day, to travel across uncharted waters, to experience what life can be about outside of the confines of a safe harbor. We too have to set sail out on a boundless ocean of mystery. The mystery that the universal and the individual are one and the same. To set sail on the uncharted waters, the recognition that that transcendent mystery is the same indwelling presence that is the truth of our being. To move out into that vast expanse of possibility, the uncharted waters of responsibility and choice, to take responsibility for the fact that we co-create our lives and to choose to create an alignment with the spiritual truth of who we are. We navigate these waters with ancient truths and new thought. And part of the process of escaping the harbor, of leaving the harbor, is to cut the moorings of our security and our habits, to release the anchors of our limitations and our old patterns, to hoist our sails into the winds of truth that do, in fact, set us free, and to set course for the life divine. So we might restate our theme quote: "Your spirit is safe in the familiarity of human limitation, and in the harbor of the certainty of habit." But that is not what your spirit is made for. So we're going to invite Candy Williams to come on up here and sing to us about this.
This song is going to celebrate the spirituality that is in jazz. Open your eyes, you can fly.
Don't cloud your eyes with others' lies.
only what you want to see. Duplicate this simple truth. Have the courage to be free. Open your eyes, you can fly. Open your eyes, you can fly. You can fly. You can fly. Never be afraid to love. Never be afraid to just be. You gotta cast away the chains of doubt and have the courage to be free. Don't cloud your eyes with others' lies. See only what you want to see. Duplicate this simple truth and have the courage to be free. Open your eyes, you can fly. Open your eyes, you can fly. You can fly. Hey, you can fly. Oh, oh, yeah. Oh, open your eyes, you can fly. Open your eyes, you can fly. So go on and fly, fly. Oh, the band.
Yay! Thank you, Candy, Jonathan, Matt, and Brad. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. We love having a jazz morning here at CSLDallas. It's fabulous. Fabulous. Yes, you can fly, you can sail, you can soar, you can move out into life. With this spiritual awakening, we can, in fact, decide to love. We can decide to live more fully and freely. We can decide to really go out and express a larger life, a more meaningful life, a more fulfilling life. So that's the first part of our theme, spiritual awakening. The second part of our theme for this step out in faith is raising consciousness. Raising consciousness, because awakening is only half of the process. Yes, we do have to gradually awaken to things. We awaken to ourselves. We awaken to who we are in life and what we seek to be in life. And we awaken to what's happening around us and what's happening in society or on the planet, right? We awaken to all of those things. But awakening is only half of it. You know what the other half is, right? You got to actually live and do and be it somehow differently in the world. We actually have to not just awaken to something, but now we have to make choices and decisions about them, and we have to live. We have to live from it. Ernest Holmes says one of the dangers of this new thought and science of mind philosophy is that we indulge in too much theory and too little practice. The raising of consciousness, the raising consciousness is the practice of growing and lifting our consciousness so that we actually live and do and be differently than we were before we were awakened, before this awakening fully took place. There's a wonderful phrase in Buddhism that we have borrowed in our community around our small groups called sanghas. And this phrase, I have been reacquainted with it recently, and being reminded of this phrase, we're gonna talk a little bit about it. And what's so amazing is how absolutely appropriate it is, equally as appropriate in the science of mind, and here at CSLDallas. So the English translation of the Sanskrit is that the Buddha nature rests in the Dharma, which rests in the Sangha. The Buddha nature rests in the Dharma, which rests in the Sangha. Now, the Buddha, of course, in Buddhism, begins by referring to the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautaman, who became the Buddha. But in addition, it also means the Buddha nature, which actually is the awakened one. The awakened one. One who has already awakened, isn't just in the process of awakening, but has become awakened. And the recognition is that each and every one of us have the Buddha nature within us, which is, of course, precisely what we teach in Science of Mind and here at CSLDallas. That each one of us is an individualized expression of the one life, the one love, that the highest God and the innermost God is the same God. That there is that indwelling presence, that is the essential nature of who we are, that is the spiritual truth of our being. And so as we awaken, spiritual awakening means that we awaken to this truth, that the Buddha nature, the Christ consciousness, is the truth of our deepest essential self. This Buddha nature rests in the Dharma. And the Dharma is the practice of the understanding of universal laws, the practice of the recognition of the principles, and the practice of living according to these universal laws and principles. It is the practice of living in alignment with the Buddha nature, which is precisely what we seek to do and seek to teach. That it is only in the living of it, in the using of the laws and principles and living in alignment with the spiritual truth that allows that essential nature not only to guide us, but to be revealed and to express itself as the fullness of our lives. There's also a deep recognition this is not always easy. It's not always easy to awaken, and it's not always easy to practice. And so the Buddha, resting in the Dharma, rests in the Sangha. The Sangha is the community of practice, the people with whom we surround ourselves, who practice with us, who hold us to our best, who remind us of our spiritual truth, who perhaps are a step or two ahead of us, who are moving down the pathway with us, where we feel that deep sense of belonging and connection and, shall we say, a different kind of safety. Not the safety of harbor, but the safety of sailing together. The safety of knowing that there are other people that are sailing the same waters that we are, and perhaps are adding notations to the chart that will help us sail in that same direction. The Buddha rests in the Dharma, which rests in the Sangha. CSLDallas is a community of practice. Our circles, our communities of practice, our Sangha, our classes, everything we do, being online together. We are in this moment, right here, right now, a community of practice. There are people all over the world right now, or whenever they're going to be watching this particular video, they're going to be in that same community with all of us because we belong together. Because we are seeking to encourage each other, inspire each other, be a part of this lifting of consciousness that comes from spiritual awakening. So we might say your essential self, the awakening to the truth of your being, rests in your understanding and use of universal principles, which rests in the practice that the community loves and supports. Now, the other thing that's really interesting is that is the general English translation of the Sanskrit. But the Sanskrit actually uses a different word besides rest in. The word it uses is refuge. The Buddha nature takes refuge in the Dharma, which takes refuge in the Sangha. And it's interesting that the word refuge doesn't always sit well with the Western culture. And yet I noticed as I was spending time with this and really thinking about who we are together at CSLDallas, why we do a month-long step out in faith, it is because we take refuge in our spiritual truth. We actually expect it to shelter us from the storms. Not that we're not out in them. Not that there aren't obstacles or challenges that we have to overcome. But because we take refuge in knowing that our sails are strong. Our boat is well constructed. We actually have, in fact, learned how to sail it. And we are not necessarily sailing alone. We might be sailing in a whole regatta. And we're all sailing through the storm together, and we can love and support each other and lift each other up and even pull each other out of the waves if our boat should capsize. That's what we do together. That's what we're about in this process of spiritual awakening, raising consciousness. And so this idea is that as we raise consciousness, we are literally expanding the consciousness of who we are to that Buddha nature, to the Christ consciousness, to whatever language you want to talk about. I hesitate sometimes to use the language of the higher self, because usually the higher self lives back here somewhere, which is actually feels separate. No, we want to stand in the higher self spot and go, oh, there's human Petra doing whatever human Petra. Went on autopilot there for a minute. Ooh, that looks interesting. Okay, it's there. It'll be all right. It'll be all right, because I am actually standing in my higher self as my higher self. That's what it means, right? To know who I am, for you to know who you are. That you are a being of possibility and transformation. And the transformation isn't from one humanness to another. Oh, I'm going to transform myself from a victim to a successful business person. I'm going to transform myself from a person who always has terrible relationships to a person who has healthy relationships. No. The transformation is, I believe I am limited as a human being to the transformation of my spiritual nature. That this is the truth of who I am. That this is the truth of who you are. That's the transformation. The moving and the living and the awakening to our spiritual nature raises our consciousness so that then we come to the obstacles and challenges and situations or opportunities to grow our lives from a much larger universal consciousness, as opposed to being safe in the harbor of our limited human reality. Do you see, when we know the truth of who we are, we can in fact cut the moorings and anchors of our smallness, of our habits and old patterns of limitation. And we can sense the wings of our own spirit, our own purpose and passion, and set our sails and our course for a full, rich, meaningful, purpose-filled life that expresses the truth of our being, that lives from that universal sense of who it is we are and how the nature of reality actually unfolds. The Buddha rests in the Dharma, which rests in the Sangha. The Buddha takes refuge in the Dharma. Our universal view takes refuge in our conviction, our faith, our deep knowing that the universal principles and laws are present. They actually work. They work for each person, every one of us, no matter who we are and where we come from or anything about our lives. They are universal principles and laws that we can take refuge in. And that word refuge to me does not mean the safety of harbor. It means the comfort of faith, the comfort of knowing. It is the deep conviction that anything can be shifted and moved through. So I'm going to close with a really brief example of this. You may know that Karen and I have been on vacation for the last 2 weeks in New Hampshire, and unexpectedly, we had our granddaughter with us. And yeah, that was a very different kind of vacation than we were expecting. To bring a 1-year-old. First of all, we expected to go up there with just a backpack. Okay, I'm not kidding you. 9 pieces of luggage later, car seat, stroller, blah, de, blah, de, blah, de, blah. 9 pieces of luggage later, we were ready to get on the plane. Ooh, man. So it was different. It was different having that. So Karen and I, at the beginning of our vacation, we found us in a little bit of resentment. But we took refuge in our spiritual truth, in the universal principles. We took refuge in that, and we turned our resentment into acceptance. Changed everything. We had resistance to the fact that she and I couldn't go out and look for wildlife and hike together at the same time early in the morning at 32 degrees. It snowed the first day we were up there because we had a 1-year-old. A lot of resistance around all of that. So what did we do? We took refuge in the spiritual truth that each one of us, Arya, Karen, and myself, we're spiritual beings having this experience together. And rather than resist it, we embraced it. We embraced the joy of a 1-year-old. We embraced the dance of, okay, you go do photography and I'll take care of Arya, and then I'll go for a big long walk, and then you'll be with her, and then we'll be together, and then we'll go for a walk when the sun is out. And we embraced it. We took refuge in the spiritual truth. Of course, we were masked along with everybody else in the airplanes, which was really great, except for our 1-year-old. She didn't need to wear a mask. So what did she do? She got a cold. And of course, when we got to the cabin, we weren't wearing masks because we were with our own little family group until Karen and I both got really bad colds. So for the first week, we were seriously under the weather with a cold, which of course meant Arya didn't sleep very well, which of course meant I didn't sleep very well. But it was cold outside. So the truth is, it was so cold outside, I didn't want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go look at wildlife. So I took refuge in the truth that there's always good that comes out of everything. There's always good. So we built fires, drank tea. We got to watch Arya take her first assisted steps on a little walker thing. We didn't miss anything. We took refuge in our universal principles. And by doing it together, do you see, we took refuge in the community of practice that our household was. We let Arya and her smiles gift us with love. And we were a community of practice, and we took refuge in that and had an amazing 2 weeks. Karen has some unbelievable photographs that some of you have seen on Facebook. Unfreaking believable, the things that she saw in this very unexpected way of vacationing for 2 weeks. Do you see, every moment we have the choice. We have the choice to stay in the harbor of our limited thinking, of our resistance, our resentments, our I wish it were different than it is. Or we can set sail out into the unknown of embracing it, accepting it, and making good out of it, and saying good will come of this. We don't have to know what it looks like. That's just a tiny little example of what it means to me to practice spiritual awakening and the raising of consciousness. So I invite you this week and this month to participate in our Step Out in Faith, to take refuge in these truths, to be in a home study group. As Joe said, Rev Patty at CSLDallas, at CSLDallas.org. That's Rev Patty with an I, if you aren't in one. The last thing I want to say is how many people say to me, I love being at CSL Dallas, I love being in the classes, I love being online, I love hearing all this stuff, and then I have to go out in the real world. No. Spiritual awakening, raising consciousness, this is the real world. This that you're living right now in this moment, with this inspiration, this is the real world. And collectively, we're going to sail out onto the uncharted waters of raising consciousness as a whole, so that this real world actually expands until it's out there as well. That's what it means to be about raising consciousness, our consciousness and the consciousness of the whole. So let us close. I invite you to join me in a spiritual mind treatment. Just taking a moment to breathe into that still and quiet place that knows, that place within that knows. Take a moment to reflect on the flowers that are blooming, the rain that has fallen, the life that is flourishing. This is the expression of life itself. The beauty and the magnificence and the unstoppable force that is life. That is the very love of creation being made manifest. That life, that love, it is welling up within each one of us. It is the truth, the essential reality of my life and of the life of each and every one. So this morning, let us affirm that there is this truth about our essential nature. That it is the universe making itself known as an individual, trying to experience all of life. And we affirm that we do know and understand the universal principles and truths and laws, and that we, in fact, use them. We use them for good. We use them for the good of our own lives. We use them for the good of the lives of our family and friends. We use them for the good of our communities and our businesses and all of the places in which we work in the world. We use them for good in our culture, in our society, in our nation. We use them for good, for the world, people everywhere, for the planet, for all beings, for all life. And as we know that as we do so, we are the universe creating anew, rich, meaningful, fulfilling lives. Knowing that this is the case, we're grateful for the opportunity to be in Sangha together, to be a community of practice, of inspiration and support and love. Blessed with this, we are so very grateful. Knowing it's already so, we let it be, and so it is.